Freshly pressed on Smooth Studio 98.1.
Mike's off. Well, you heard it, and they're proud sponsors of Freshly Pressed for today. Of course, check your time. It's 7:30. Time for us to go through the detailed analysis of our newspaper stories this morning. Joining us is our analyst, Esho1. That's his tag on Twitter, at Esho1.
Ayo, how you doing?
Good morning, I'm fine, very fine.
There you go. Just one more time, just so people can really feel you.
Good morning, Lagos.
We like it.
That is the energy.
Yes, Ayo Esho, great to have you here in the studio with us as we go through today's national stories. And Lagos, great to have you out there with us as well. Now you can join us on several platforms, not just by listening to us over the airwaves. You can actually go over to our YouTube channel. So just search for us on YouTube as Smooth FM Lagos. We pop up straight away, or just type in the designation straight away, youtube.com/smooth 981 FM Lagos. It's very simple. And now you can also send us messages to our WhatsApp number as we dissect the stories for this morning. That WhatsApp number, it is
0809 444 981.
Don't say we don't give you that number now. Make sure you put it down. We've also tweeted that number to you as well. So if you search on Twitter right now with the hashtag Freshly Pressed 981, you will find the national news stories up there, as well as our WhatsApp number again tweeted. So make sure you also use that hashtag if you want to comment via Twitter on this morning's stories. It makes it easier for us to find those stories, find your comments and read them out. And as we mentioned, not only can you watch us on the YouTube live stream, but you can also comment on that live stream channel as well. But without further ado, I think we've got a few stories to get into.
Yes, the newspaper has this first one. The headline reads, Massive pipeline explosion rocks Ilara community in Ogun State. Now, moving away from the story in Lagos, which we will touch on later, we'll go to Ogun State, where a massive explosion was reported to have rocked Ilara area near Ogijo in Ogun State after a vandalized pipeline exploded. Now, the report said there was gathered the explosion occurred about 10 p.m. on Sunday, and the fire was still raging as at 3 a.m. on
This
Monday.
morning.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Ayo?
So we're talking about like 4 hours ago. Who knows if it's been put out yet? We don't know about that. It's painful because there was a report. I'm not going to trust Daily Mail very much, but there was another vandalization that happened 30 meters north of Umaya, according to them, and life were lost. And if you also see this, you say they said sources claim the community did not report the case as they should have. We don't know whether some people were taking advantage of this vandalization and probably got taken out.
That's normally what happens, doesn't it?
And exactly, and maybe a spark or something while they were doing that would have caused this. Now, the reason I was referring to that, although I don't think I should dwell too much because it's Daily Mail, I'll say that again, is that they said there was some kind of position between the people and the police as that were there. They were collecting some money from those people that were there to scoop the fuel. Now, that's going to be very sad if that actually happened, because I mean, in a time like this that we've been having too much explosions from tankers to, it's a sad situation. And at the end of the day, this still boils down to ourselves. Permit me to say this. There's saying you like at the end of the day, when we keep doing this, we're actually hurting ourselves. We're talking about the suits in Port Harcourt, for instance, that we've not been able to find a solution to. And then when we keep having this kind of fires, it's going to be destroying the ozone layer. It's going to be creating particles in the air, which is bad for the health and also bad for the economy.
And even the safety of people, lives and property.
And safety of people. And these are refined products, because Mosimi is a major depot in Nigeria that serves the southwest. So definitely there's going to be loss of revenue. There's going to be hazard to the society. So it's just terrible. I just hope our people can learn from this.
It definitely points to a failure in a lot of things, actually. But thank you very much for that, Ayo.
Also, sticking with this day for this next story, Ayo, NNPC finalizes $724 million oil finance deal with Schlumberger. They said the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation yesterday disclosed that it had finalized the crude oil production financing deal that it negotiated with Schlumberger for the Anyalu and Mado oil fields under all mining licenses OML 83 and OML 85 offshore. Cast some insight into the story.
So, it's a JV agreement, and it's a good one. I mean, it's more money coming into the economy because this is more investment into the economy, and then we're also going to increase our barrels per day by 50,000. So that's good. We are currently at 2.3 million barrels per day. So that's going to add to it. That's a very good thing. It's positive news at least.
All right. That's pretty brief, but thank you very much. The next story from Premium Times, Lagos. While we're sharing this story, please send your contributions via WhatsApp 0809 444 0981. Premium Times newspaper says Lagos State government announces preliminary findings into the ghastly accident, restricts tankers' movements. So the accident and the fatal loss of life, and of course damage to the cars and the burnt cars numbering over 50 that were experienced on Thursday is still fresh in our minds. Premium Times have reported that the accident caused by a petrol tanker that led to the death of 9 people, over 50 cars burnt. While addressing journalists, the Lagos commissioner said interim findings show that the petrol tanker was carrying far above its appropriate weight. It said it would not have been loaded up to the weight of 30 tons, which is twice its pulling capacity. We know about the story. It was very, it was something that shook a lot of us in Lagos. It made us realize how dangerous life is, and life expectancy is getting lower and lower by the day. Ayo, what are your thoughts on this story?
Okay, so it loaded above 30 tons, and I'm thinking to myself, before after what they do is, so when they're going in, they weigh the vehicle. When they load and they're about to leave, they weigh the vehicle too. Ascertain the amount of gasoline or AG, whichever one you're buying that you bought. So normally the weight will tell you, and every truck actually has its own capacity. So how did it fail that test at that particular point? And then it's not just about having this report. There has to be repercussions to what has happened to the company that was actually involved in this, because lives were lost. There's been debates in the media saying that are there really 9 people? That 9 it doesn't look like it could have been 9, but whether it is even 1 or it's still bad. It's still bad. And when lives are lost and properties are lost like this, somebody needs to be more responsible. And it's not just okay for us to just say that they of course pressure also matters, because when you also overfill up a particular container, there's normally meant to be space between the liquid to allow gaseous and if the pressure builds up, then it could even explode in itself. So these are things that normally are checked. HSC is normally meant to be done before they hit the road. So
okay, I have a couple of questions, because you've touched on a few things which I think are worth expanding upon. One that you that you sort of mentioned is the owners of these trucks and tankers. If we're being told that this tanker was loaded to twice its pulling weight capacity, this comes down to a question of greed as well. We find that things like this are done all the time. We see it with flatbed trucks where things are not secured properly, but people are still moving because they want to make money. They want to make more money than they're currently making. What sanctions do you think should be put against such people? And then the other is, we noticed that in this Lagos State is saying, well, henceforth they're directed to obtain a roadworthiness certificate. But excuse me, is this not something that everyone, first of all, is supposed to have? But secondly, they just collect money for it. There are no tests done, there are no checks done. And so what can be done to ensure that Lagos State doesn't just soundbite this, but they actually make sure this is done?
Hence, aside from me, it's one thing to say roadworthiness. We all know how roadworthiness is done in Lagos. At least I'll stick to Lagos, and I'm sure Lagos will probably be the pinnacle of this test being done. So if this is being done in Lagos, how is it done elsewhere? So it's not just about roadworthiness. Are they really going to perform the tests that they're meant to do when it comes to roadworthiness? And now let's also consider this. This is not just a function of roadworthiness or not. I think it still boils down to the person or the company that is involved here. If you remember, there was a video, I don't know if you've seen it, a video of a guy holding on and trying to...
using a rag to try to block a hole.
And the truth is, this is actually what happens in this country. The impunity.
Let's bear in mind this particular tanker, they said it was manufactured in 1999. That's when it was originally bought as brand new. Since then, it's been recycled, changed hands, it's been resold 13 times.
I don't think that should be a problem.
I mean, at what point do you
you
actually discard of the vehicle?
You expect that normally that's the idea of roadworthiness, right? The idea is meant to be, is it roadworthy? Normally, before you even sell any car, in fact, that's why it's done in Nigeria yearly. So I don't care if your car is was made 2018. The fact is it roadworthy? Now, whether it was made a longer time doesn't matter. But the problem is we've been having not just that. There's something else, an epidemic. I'll use that term.
Yeah.
Our downfalls in Lagos. You see how they are, and these same buses actually get roadworthy. They get past.
I'm so happy you also pointed out downfalls, because according to some eyewitnesses who were there, people who escaped before the explosion of the tanker in Lagos, they had said that the tanker driver, what actually caused the initial accident was that there was a downfall that had stopped at a place that was not an authorized bus stop, and in trying to avoid hurting the passengers and the downfall driver, that's what caused the truck to tip and so on and so forth, and the horrible consequences were seen after that. We have a menace of public of downfall drivers, of okadas, of all these public means of transport not obeying road rules, and they cause accidents. The other day, a cellist was hit by a downfall driver. A friend of mine, his cellist was hit, has been in a coma for literally weeks now. What can we get our road safety, our last mile, to do to enforce road rules against these users of the road, because they are the ones that tend to cause most of the accidents.
Yes.
By adhering strictly to the rules that they set.
Who would adhere? Who would enforce it?
They need to enforce it. Road safety is there. We have let's say last one is just for transport for traffic, but we have road safety there. We have VIOs. We have enough people to do this. And let me also point out, if you notice in the pictures that we saw, it looked like most of the 9 that at least were said must have come from the Davao, because people even in the Davao will find it hard to come out.
Yes.
You know, these are things that we need to check. And for most of us that actually understand what these things should be, most of us are enlightened. I think we should not just sit down and just say it's none of our business. It's about time we started educating people more on the safety measures.
Thank you very much, Ayo. We'll go on now to this next story from Guardian newspaper. Pressure mounts on Buhari to sack security chiefs. There has been the common call from different parties in government, including Dino Malaya, who lent his voice to this one. Now, a particular group, Good Governance Initiative, they're called, yesterday took their view up a notch further by asking the president to resign, saying that what's happening now is not child's play, relating to the insecurity problem plaguing the country in recent times. Ayo.
Okay, so what's painful about this is if you remember when the IG was invited at the time, it looked like it was just being politics because of the arrest of Dino Malaya. But the truth is, one of the things that were meant to be discussed then was meant to be security, you know. And this has been going on and on. And what's painful about this thing is, lives are being lost. So this is not a function of maybe financial issues or economic issues, which I always say we can always patch it here and there. We'll lose here, we'll gain here. But when people lose their lives, you can't gain it back, you know. And I just don't know. I don't know if the Senate and or the House of Rep have what it takes to actually sack this security chiefs by themselves, you know. I think the president needs to sit down and discuss this with the House of Assembly and know if they actually need to do this.
It needs to get presidential approval.
Yeah.
But Ayo, here's my question now. At the moment, we're seeing a lot of clamor and increased pressure for a lot of these things to happen. Skeptics would say that this is a heavy politicization of what has been happening in our country for years already. What would you say about that?
Okay, so I don't know about politics here. The fact is, people are losing their life. Now,
Okay,
I'm going to say this.
The reason I bring up politics because one of the first headlines talks about will be child's play if APC returns to power in 2019. So so that's what they've done of the offset.
And that's why I'm trying not to talk about the APC or the PDP. The fact is, people are losing their lives, and it comes down to something. Follow, if you don't do your job well, you probably get a query, right? If you get another query, then somebody will say, okay, you know what, maybe step aside and let someone else do the job. That's what is expected, you know. But what's painful here is that this thing keeps reoccurring and reoccurring and reoccurring.
And it's almost business as usual.
It's like business as usual. And that's why I'm saying that maybe we need to shake the table a little, you know. Let's look, if let's give an example. If Donald Trump was to be president of Nigeria, don't you think that people would have been fired by now?
I think he would have packed up and left, because let's not forget, I'm very serious, because we continuously underestimate the problems we have. They're long-ranging problems. Our security issue is the way it is today because for decades we refused to invest in security in this country. That is the reality.
I agree
so
with you.
how can we then say? So my question is just this: are we, as usual, thinking very short-term, especially when it comes to something like a long-term strategy? If we're investing in security and we've just started investing in the last 3 years or 4 years, think about how much longer it's going to take for us to see the dividends of that.
So do we just fold our hands and then keep looking?
I'm not saying that. I'm just asking, are we thinking about that
Here's my
aspect
belief.
as well?
Here's my belief. I believe that there are always solutions to every problem. Yes, I know ours is actually very multifaceted. I understand that. But the fact is, there's always a solution. And if you're not getting it right, someone else needs to try.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that viewpoint. We've got messages coming in. First of all, let's read out the messages up on our live stream. Michael Adetutu says it's quite appalling why we cannot enforce full compliance. Rather, greed is the major thing in play, and illegal gratuity, tanker manufacturing date, loading docks, weighing contents carried, and so much more. We just need to enforce compliance in Nigeria, he says. While up on WhatsApp, Jide from VI says, if we say a little space should have been left at the top of the tanker to accommodate air and evaporated PMS, shouldn't the same apply to our private cars? Many of us fill our fuel tanks till it's vomiting fuel, especially during scarcity. Safety. Jide very well pointed out. It's something that I try to let.
That is actually created already in your car.
And some people will say it's a reserve tank.
People,
There's no such thing.
Keep pumping until the very end of it. It's a little bit it's questionable at the very least. Max says, please highlight the fact that Okadas have been banned with a law in the last administration. No enforcement is happening currently, and this administration needs, he puts in capitals, to wake up on the issue in order to prevent unnecessary accidents and loss of life. While we've got this one in from Yinka, who says, the annoying part of this explosion, talking about the tanker in Lagos, is that it was avoidable and questions need to be asked. Was the tank designed to engineering capacity? Were there impact tests done on the tank? At the point of loading the truck, was the truck checked for roadworthiness or that it was fit to be on the road? Why was the tanker carrying a flammable product on a road at that rush hour? Professionalism is required at every level, even at FRSC. So what can an FRSC official who has no idea or about air resistance or drag coefficient do in trying to understand the dynamics of a truck being on the road? Well, a lot of interesting things to think about there, but let's move on. We've got this next story as really just an announcement in from ThisDay newspaper. Macron's visit. Lagos announces traffic diversions in Alausa and African shrines. So there will be a historic visit to Nigeria of the President of France, Emmanuel Macron. He will be visiting Lagos State, and the government announced really actually yesterday that there will be traffic diversions and restricted movements from 12 noon tomorrow to 12 midnight, all right, on Tuesday. The 3rd of July. It will be around Alausa, the African shrine, Agidingbi access. So that should definitely be very interesting. Very, very quickly for you, Ayo, your thoughts on this, because every time we have a visiting dignitary, Lagosians groan about the impact on traffic.
I think mainland will suffer this the most, but of course, you know, it will always ricochet down to
the island.
So,
sure.
Yes, but what's interesting about this is going to the shrine, and I actually found out that he was actually a senior civil servant at French Embassy in Lagos in 2004. So I was thinking to myself, perhaps if
you were friends with him then?
No,
he was frequenting the shrine at that
to
time.
The shrine
I see.
I wish I was friends with the president of France. You know, so I don't know exactly what they're going to be discussing, but he seemed to be interested in that, maybe horticulture or something. But he's also going to be going to Abuja to speak to the president on terrorism and security generally. It's interesting. He's welcome to Lagos, the first time here, so first time as the
Yes,
president.
the
As
president.
president.
Yes,
I just
right.
think Lagosians should just be very aware of that. Your movement might be a
Yeah.
little bit affected tomorrow.
Especially
So.
if you're moving to the mainland, those around mainland.
Yeah.
But we've seen how that traffic can also
It will-
affect the
it will- it
island,
will
really.
definitely
So,
get here.
whatever it is you're doing, just if you don't have to move about so much tomorrow, then do limit your movements. Find alternative ways to work tomorrow, so that it can make life easier for us.
I imagine people are already making excuses for not going to work. now.
Hey, if you don't have
If
to
you're
be in
walking
the
it around
office,
Alausa, especially, you
Nah.
might just
Avoid that
very
entirely.
straightforward. Okay, let's go on. Talk about the telco industry at the moment. Teleology beats the deadline over 9Mobile acquisition. We've taken this story from the Daily Times, and it's been a long time going back and forth over what's going on with 9Mobile, who's going to acquire, who's not. According to the Daily Times report, this Teleology Holdings Limited have beaten the deadline for ownership of the firm with a payment of $251 million made into the Central Bank of Nigeria's escrow account, pending the receipt of a no objection from the NCC, that's the Nigeria Communications Commission. So it is very interesting. They had made a previous payment way back in June, I believe, about 50 million US dollars. It was a non-refundable deposit. It was a demonstration of their commitment to acquire 9Mobile, and they were given a 90-day sort of timeline. They asked for an extension. Reports are telling us that it's back in, but they say that this money obviously far exceeds what they need to just purchase. It's now going to sort of extend into an expansion project for the telco company. Your
So
thoughts?
it's more investment. So by the way, it's March 21 from what I'm seeing here.
Ah,
So
right.
that means 90 days from now should be like March to that's July, maybe, right? March plus 3. No, June
Yeah.
21.
June
So they
21.
had to make that payment, and I think maybe they already had the funds, but they were probably holding on. It's always better to have cash at hand.
That's $251 million is a lot to just have on hand. I think they had to gather those funds.
Okay, let's say that because it's a good one. It's more investment into the country, into the telecoms industry. You remember, back in the days, it was Glo that actually drove down the cost of telecommunication in Nigeria. At the time. So yes, if you have more investment, you have more competition, and more competition, cost goes down, and also more jobs for people. 9Mobile is safe, so it's good for Nigeria. Nothing much to say about this. It's also interesting that it's actually this says Bloomberg lists it's as a private equity firm, but the value of the investment portfolio is not stated. Some reports estimate the value at $11 billion. So
Well.
that's good.
Just coming out of there. Well, they do claim that it's going to change the telco industry as we know it. That's what they're saying. So certainly looking forward to that if it
Fingers
helps the
crossed.
consumer and not just the owners of the company.
Very
That should be
important.
good. I've got a couple more messages very quickly. We've got this one up on Twitter.
From Ayo. Ayo says, in my opinion, I do not think second security chiefs will put an end to this menace. My advice to President Buhari is to be focused, strategic, and comprehensive in his approach for a lasting solution on this over 10-year-old criminal menace.
Very interesting stuff. Still more coming in. With this one is in from Esho. And he says, FRSC, VIO, and all other agencies charged with road safety have decided to focus on private vehicles. I know people who have been fined for cracked windscreens in private vehicles. What sort of fines do they hand out for bald tires, absent tires, zero lights, zero wing mirrors that many commercial vehicles move about in? Food for thought. Let's move away from that now onto our court system. So the Special Anti-Corruption Courts had delivered 324 judgments in 6 months. That's a headline from the Guardian newspaper, and it's quite an impressive feat as the NJC, the National Judicial Commission, rolled out these figures just yesterday, I believe, saying that in the last 6 months they've delivered 324 judgments. That's striking up 12 of the cases, reserving 62 for judgment. They do take us through the sort of feats of our judicial system. It's an interesting article at the moment, and I think we picked it. I'd like to know your thoughts. Because we've been complaining about how slow the processes have been in our courts.
Exactly. I mean, we've already know that we have the timeline normally ranges between 9 to 15 years to get a judgment in Nigeria, and most of it is actually 60% of it is being slowed down by the Court of Appeal, according to them. So what I did was I just wanted to look at the data, and I noticed that the Federal High Court says 7, which is 2.5%. Not like they had so much decision made, and the state high courts had 23.7%, and appeal court 25%, and Supreme Court 41%. It's not exactly bad, considering the fact, if you consider where we're coming from, and remember that this special court was actually inaugurated in November 2017. So it's not bad at all.
Yeah.
It might look like we're not moving so fast, but it's better than where we're coming from.
Yeah.
So,
now here's a question. I think it's been fantastic that they've managed to create these special courts for anti-corruption cases. What would be great to see is why can't they use this across the board? Why can't we develop mechanisms for regular issues? I mean, things like even our traffic, traffic towards things like this to
I think
speed
something
up
like that
our legal
happens
process.
for traffic. I mean, there's
They're supposed to be the mobile
Yeah.
courts. To be honest, I haven't seen them anywhere on the island ever.
You've been
Ever.
good. You've been a good citizen then.
Ever.
You've probably got it.
But I see a lot of people being
I've
bad
heard-
citizens
I've
again,
heard
etc.,
the whole-
etc.
yeah, true. Well,
So
true.
I've never
But-
seen any of those guys in action.
Well, I've heard a lot of people that have been taken to the special courts.
The
mobile
mobile
courts.
courts,
Yes.
that's fantastic.
Anyway, but the good thing about this is what I say. So when we start small, we might think global, but we act locally. Okay, so this is a good start. When we start this and we see that it's working, then we can try to expand it to other aspects like criminal and all that. So yes, it's something probably for the long run. That's what's going to happen. But let's watch this. And I like the fact that one problem we've always had in Nigeria is that we don't keep data, and the fact is that they're keeping the statistics here. So it's very important. So you can sit down and check how it has performed over the year, then puts a case forward to explain why we need something like this across the board. So it's good for me. It's good for me.
Awesome.
I think it's a good one.
Thank you, Ayo.
Thank you very much. Still more messages. A lot of people obviously having a lot to say about the tanker fire. Diale from Adjas says there are other tankers violating tonnage regulations at the depots. To put an end to mishaps, enforcement is key. The Lagos State report is not enough. People must be punished. While Marianne says, has anyone been charged to court on the Ojuelegba container incident? Will anyone be charged to court for the Otedola Bridge explosion? If not, of course, we would have a repeat of these tragedies. I weep for this country. And Tony says, guys, Lagos State should also be held culpable because they are just interested in the IGRs from roadworthiness, etc., instead of focusing on compliance. Interesting, Tony. I would ask people out there who are sending in comments, do you think that perhaps we should narrow it down? Because when we say things like Lagos State, the government, we keep talking in very abstract terms. Should we start penalizing the particular officers who sign off on things that they should not have signed off on? Do you think maybe that will have some sort of effect?
Besides, the weight of loading is heavy on Lagos, so you wouldn't necessarily blame the government in terms
No,
of.
so I blame the officials, the specific officials who are
They're
meant to do
meant to be
their
in charge
jobs,
of
who
this.
refuse to do their jobs.
And
That's
ignore
what I'm
them.
looking at.
Yeah.
But let's move on, though, very quickly. In our final story from the Vanguard newspaper, Budget 2018, Power, Works and Housing Ministry earmarks 10 billion naira for public schools. Now, this story I've taken because the figures are not really adding up. I'm not really understanding where this money is going to and what it's being used for. So, what we're told, according to Vanguard, is that the Federal Ministry of Power, Works and Housing is to spend about 10 billion naira approximately on the construction of public schools. But the nature of the schools, the names and the locations have not been provided. Also, in the same budget, you'll notice that about 9 billion is for the purchase of vehicles. That's out of a total allocation of just over 700 billion. The ministry has also put aside 19 point something billion for the purchase of industrial equipment, again unspecified. There's another 793 million earmarked for the purchase of agricultural equipment, not specified. I mean, Ayo, your thoughts on this?
Wow.
Oh dear.
I don't know. It's anyway. 10 billion on construction of public schools. That's a good start, at least. I'm just going to take the
But for the
positive from this.
construction? Well, okay, go ahead,
See,
sorry.
well,
positives,
if
the
10
positives.
billion, if 10 billion is going to really be spent on construction of public schools, well, it's good. Okay, for now, I've had too much bad news for a while. I'll just take the positive here. More money into education. The education is dying. 7% of the budgets only was earmarked for education. Okay, so far below the 20% that is expected or was advised by UNESCO. So if I'm getting extra money now, I don't know if this 10 billion was also part of the budget. You know how budgets things could be done.
Mhm.
It could actually be part of it. I'm hoping not. I'm hoping it's just coming from the Ministry of Housing and and works. So I'm just going to take the positive and move on.
Okay,
Yeah.
I like that. I like that. Focus on the positive. It's definitely a good way to be. But just like that, we have pretty much come to the end of Freshly Pressed for this morning. I want to thank Ayo Esho for joining us as usual on a Monday. Thank you very much, Ayo, for coming in.
Thank you very much for having me.
You can find him up on Twitter. He's at eshow1 and continue the
Visit cars45.com today to sell or trade in your car for another one.